Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Otaku Go here on the Gunpla Network. As always, I'm the Spicer, and today's review of the Figuarts Zero Naruto Uzamaki Kizuna Relations Tamshii Nations Tokyo Limited figurine comes to you courtesy of those fine folks over at Side 7 Exports. If you're looking for anything exclusive or Japan limited, whether that's Gundam base or Tokyo limited, they are your one-stop shop for all of that. So be sure to check out their website, side7exports.com, and be sure to use the promo code GunplaNetwork10 to save yourself 10% off. So this figurine is interesting for a couple of different personal reasons for me. One of them being I'm pretty new to Naruto in general. Now I know, there's a lot of Naruto and you get into Boruto and stuff, but I'm not quite finished with Shippuden yet, but I started, within the last year, so this is all still very fresh to me. This is not, I missed the boat 20 years ago when this came out, or 10 years ago, however long original Naruto was. It was a long time ago at this point. But yeah, so this is all still very fresh, even OG original Naruto like this. Now, not only is this the second Naruto figure of, at least early kid Naruto that I own, but it is the only one I think that's on my shelf right now that is, purely designed around the resin. You do have Naruto there, but the resin is the star of the show. The clearer pieces, all of the different fades into different colors, it's all done very, very well. And that is kind of the big takeaway, if you don't want to just sit through me going into detail about all the sculpt and stuff for this figure, is if you like flashy resin pieces and you're not necessarily as focused on the character as far as its sculpt and whatnot, this is a lot more up your alley. Now, it is well executed in Naruto as well. It's just Naruto is very heavily outshined by the Rasengan that he's using. And yes, if I'm correct, this is more closely related to the manga version of the Rasengan, as it's usually portrayed to be yellow in that versus blue, blue and white, for what we see in the anime. And you kind of get some of those trails into blue at the end, but regardless. Now, in terms of the box, there's really not a lot going on here. If you're familiar with Bandai boxes and exclusives, this is pretty on par. There's no window, so you don't really see what the figure looks like inside, but you do have a clear, nicely photographed picture on the front. You have all of the different logos from OG Naruto, Figuarts Zero, Kizuna Relations, limited Tokyo version down there. You have the Tamshii Nations Tokyo logo on the side, the Kizuna Relations logo in the top, and then you have some nice texturing on the other sides, and that's kind of it. You don't really have a lot going on, but once again, par for the course for limited release Bandai stuff. Now, since we don't get a window, I did want to show you what the packaging looks like. It's nothing special to write home about, but it protects the figure. And if you're curious, this is what it's going to look like when you open the box. It's well protected, the clamshell's done well, it has some tape around it, and then you have the plastic cellophane wrap in there to help make sure the figure doesn't get scuffed by anything. So at least it's well protected. Now, once you get it out of the box, you get to see just how cool this is. If you're big on effect pieces, like I said, this is your thing. This is it. Naruto's, once again, well done, a little exaggerated in his proportions, and I'll take a look at that in a minute, because I think that's probably where most of the, I wouldn't say errors, but strange creative choices take place. But the Rasengan, it flows. I do wish it was a little bit more bulbous towards the front, but I understand kind of what it's going for, so, it's more of a personal preference. But you have a really nice concentrated yellow there that fades into the blue around the top, and then down into a purple color down towards the bottom with the ground and dust and stuff being kicked up. This is, without going into full-on statues, this is pretty much as good as you're going to get as far as a figurine that has a lot of this effect stuff and all the kind of motion to it, right? Because even like your prize figures obviously are not going to have this type of emotion. And then usually statues are more focused around kind of being flashy than they are having a sense of dynamic, fluid motion to them. Now, Naruto, as I said, is kind of the underdog here. He's overshined by the Rasengan and all the effects. And he's the part where I think things get a little different, right? I'm not saying it looks bad. I'm just saying it's strange creatively. So, Naruto from like the waist up looks fine. He has kind of this weird grimace face, but it's pretty matching for Naruto. If you've seen Naruto recently, it's pretty on par. His hair has some nice fluid pushed back motion. His headband's done well. The little charm on his shoulder is done well. You see some different shading on the jacket, kind of the orange bits, and a little bit on the blue. It looks fine. His non-Rasengan hand, which I believe is his left hand, if I'm remembering this right, is a little soft. It feels more just like one clump, but it's a very minor thing, and it's not something you're really going to notice unless you're staring right at it. Then you get into his legs, and I think the legs, while they're not bad, I do feel like proportionally they're maybe just a hair small, but once again, art style that kind of matches OG Naruto. But the shading is significantly more intense, which, makes sense. The Rasengan's putting off the light. That's why Naruto's top half is much, much brighter. And then his legs are kind of getting darker, because I imagine this is the Rasengan from, like, the final battle with Sasuke at the end of OG Naruto. But that's where you get really heavy shading. I think it works to sell this effect. It is fairly minor, because if you've got this on your shelf, you're not looking at the back of his leg. But it is something I think it's maybe a bit too heavy. I don't think it looks bad. I think it's just consistency-wise, I think it just goes really, really heavy, really, really fast. But that's really just kind of my personal viewpoint on it. It doesn't draw away from the figure, it's not distracting, but if you're looking at this in detail and you're looking at how these techniques were applied, you're going to notice that. Now, if you want, because this is something that most your static figures, it's really not going to matter as much where it is on your shelf. And I really mean this in relation to where you look at your shelves, right? So for me personally, my shelves are all above me for the most part. I don't have them in class detolfs, they're all above my desk. So I'm looking up at them, which is why I provided this angle, because this is kind of how I get to see it. And it is a little bit more how the figure is designed and oriented. Now, it doesn't look bad from a more straight on or top view, but you do lose some of that detailing on the bottom. Once again, this is something, it depends on where you're going to put it. I think it does impact the displayability, if you will, or the shelf presence of it. But regardless of where you're putting it, it's not bad, it just looks different. Now, totally your prerogative on where you put it, but I wanted to give you a representation of what I see on my shelf, since it's not quite the same as I'd say a lot of collectors out there. Now, as far as comparing it to other Bandai stuff, here it is against a Figuarts Minato. So, as you see, Naruto's a little bit bigger than Minato, but he's not super out of scale. So if you have these two together, with this being so much more flashy than pretty much everything else, this really fits, right? It doesn't look that awkward. Of course, you're not going to think they're in scale with each other, but that's really not the point of this figurine, right? So if you've got some Figuarts on your shelf, it fits in pretty well. It's not going to crazy oversize them, and it's not going to look too awkward. Of course, this being a little bit more expensive than a Figuarts is going to look a little bit better, but once again, it fits in line. Now, if you had like the anime stars or like the cheaper Bandai lines, then you're going to notice some of that difference, but from a distance, once again, it's just going to look like you have a Naruto display versus picking out individual pieces and thinking, oh, this looks better than others. Now, in terms of actual figurines, here it is against a Grandista Sasuke from OG Naruto, and as you can see, the Grandista is quite a bit bigger. Now, of course, these are designed to be bigger. These are not your traditional prize figures. They're a little bit taller, a little bit bigger in terms of their overall scale. And this feels more of, well, this Naruto can be your centerpiece as far as grabbing your attention with all of the effects. From a size perspective, if you do a lot of Grandista stuff, it's going to not hold up as much. So if you have more your Banpresto, your prize figure stuff, your Figuarts, it's going to be a lot closer in line to that. But if you have things like this Grandista Sasuke here, it's still going to grab your attention, it's just not as much of the focal point. Now, if you have the Grandista OG Naruto's, this one is the not really Kurama version, like his eyes are red, he's got the claws, but it's kind of relatively the same thing as the base version. It's the same thing. This one is a little bit shorter than the Sasuke, but if you want a really good static Naruto that feels in line from a quality perspective as far as paint and sculpt, these two fit very well together. So if you want kind of a cohesive display of like original design Naruto that are, original recipe Naruto, this is going to be a little bit more in line with that, and it's not as tall, so it feels a little bit less of a overshadowing it, if you will, like the Sasuke. The Sasuke was quite a bit taller. Now, of course, if you have any of the adult Grandistas, they're going to be much closer to the Sasuke size. But regardless, it still works. It just works differently, and I think that's something this figure has a lot to it. That resin, regardless of size, is very eye-catching, and that's the whole selling point of the figurine. The Naruto's done well, but he's kind of the side dish, if you will. He's not the focus of the kit or of the figurine specifically. Now, overall, has this kind of changed my viewpoint on what I think anime figurines should be? Not really. I think there is places, and we saw it with the Grandista stuff and even with Figuart stuff, that having flashier things like this or even the larger statues is cool, and I think it works into a display, but it doesn't necessarily overshadow everything, right? It can fit very cohesively with stuff in a similar size, or if you've got some of those bigger statues, the effects off the Rasengan will match that very well, or if you have more Grandista stuff or larger static stuff, it's still going to grab attention, it's just not going to be the big flashy centerpiece. So I think all of the figurines you can find have a place if you like that design, but if you want something flashy that's going to have a lot of shelf presence, this is the route you should probably go. But that's just me. If you have this, or if you have questions about this, let me know in the comments down below. I'll do my best to answer them. And of course, as always, friends, I've been the Spicer here for the Gunpla Network. Please do your best to stay safe and keep on collecting.